Well, welcome back, everybody. Here we are today, and we're going to be talking about some aspects of Chapter 7. I'm just going to really sort of glib through some of the more obvious concepts I think that you'll be able to grasp from your reading. I want to spend a little bit more time with a couple of the theories of concerning origins of deviant behavior and tie those together. And a few of these, singular concepts. But deviance in sociology encompasses crime, for sure, criminal behavior. Usually when we think of deviance as something that's negative, and most of the time when we think of it, we think of those that break the law. And certainly crime is one aspect of deviance behavior. It's a particular type of deviance. When we break laws, that's criminal deviance, right? Simply breaking society's laws or state laws. But in sociology, the concept of deviance is much broader and encompasses crime. But there's many other areas of in society and in daily life that we can talk about deviant behavior. So from a sociological standpoint, in defining deviance, deviance is simply the breaking of norms. So one way to look at it is in thinking about the definition of deviance is that if we do not have norms that regulate a behavior, then we can't really talk about any behavior being deviant. So without norms, there's no deviance to talk about. So they go together. And I may have stated once before that deviance, in many ways, is, in many respects, at a deeper level, is a positive thing for human beings, because some of the earlier chapters, you get the sense that people, individual human beings, are more or less like puppets on a string, and when fully socialized into society, we become yes men or women, if you will. And certainly that would be the case if we didn't have the phenomenon of deviant behavior. So to deviate from the norm, any norm, whether it's a formal norm or informal norm, for example, we could be analyzing, and again, these concepts are used by sociologists to do analytical work when they're studying the actual groups or organizations out there. So let's say you're studying a street gang, well, a deviant subculture. But even within that deviant subculture, as a social analyst, you're going to be maybe interested in how deviance is treated within that, how it's defined, how it's treated within that deviant subculture. So if you're studying a gang, you're going to want to understand what are the norms, what are the faultways, mores defined by the group, and then once someone deviates from the norm, how are sanctions brought to bear. So it's important to study this in all social contexts. So we have this broad definition of that deviance is simply the breaking of norms. And so with that definition, then we're all deviant. Many times on a daily basis, we deviate from expectations of whatever situation we're in, whether it's in the family, if it's at work, in school, coming late for class, not studying for your exams, falling down on your duties at home, or these are breaking the norms. And so in that sense, then we would be considered deviant, except for maybe the labeling theory, when we'll get to it here shortly and discuss how labeling theory defines deviant behavior. Somewhat different. We have three major theories that we're looking at today. But deviance is in relation to conformity. So what is conformity? This is simply behaviors that are appropriate in behavior and appearance that conforms to the norms of the group. So a conformist is a person that tends to conform to what's expected of them in whatever group situation. And so we have this divide between conformity and deviance. Uh, for most of us in daily life, we conform most of the time to expectations, normative expectations in the groups in which we belong. But we'll also deviate as well. That's just being human. And getting back to the positive aspect of deviance is that deviance, in some sense, is what makes us human after all, because we have that ability to say no, and so we have the ability to deviate and to say no to society. And so this, to some extent, deviance also implies a kind of freedom, ability to say no to its social expectations. And when we talk about positive deviance, when large groups of people, let's say, for example, the civil rights movement, when large groups of people decide that they're not going to go along with at the time, the norms of the society or culture, and they stand together as a social movement, and they deviate. And at the time, like Martin Luther King, when he was he's heralded today as a great cultural hero for freedom. But during the time of during the civil rights movement, he was seen as a criminal, and many times he was thrown in jail, right? But his deviance was a positive deviance, and the civil rights movement over time, all of its successes and the changes that it's brought to future generations is a positive thing. So many times deviance can be a positive force that helps to bring about positive social change in society. So let's look at once deviance occurs in whatever cultural, social context, sanctions generally will be brought to bear when we break those norms. And the book chapter introduces two types of norms, and I usually kid my classes and say if there's any two concepts that you may remember after, they say we only retain about 10% of what we learn in school, and I always kid my class that these two concepts you may remember after taking sociology, and that's folkways and mores. And these are two types of norms, and they're relative in terms of their context, cultural social context. But it's for our reasons, we need to remember that folkways are simply customary ways of routine behaviors on a daily basis. It's all the etiquette and small do's and don'ts of everyday life in our culture. And generally, you can tell when we break a folkway by looking at the kind of punishment you get. So usually punishment for folkways are informal. So we talk about informal sanctions. Usually it's just a slap on the wrist, a frown across the table, maybe a shunning from a peer group, for example, or a timeout period. It's an informal. It's not going to cost you your life for having gone against the folkway, deviated from the folkway. So usually the way in which you can tell you've broken a folkway is the type of sanction that will be given to you. Mores so now folkways are many in number. They cover a large range of everyday do's and don'ts and etiquette and so forth. Mores are more central to your group's survival. So mores tend to be very important norms that help to protect the perceived unity of the society or group. And so mores are, if you think of our society, things like you shall not murder, steal, rape, breaking the laws. Most of your heavier laws are protect the population from breaking or attempt to get folks to conform to not breaking the mores of the society. And when we do break a more, we can tell because the punishment is usually much more severe. So a lot of times more formal types of sanctions will be brought to bear. There's different types. I mean, we could talk about speeding down the highway is a kind of a moray. If people are just driving any way they want on the highway, that would be quite a lot of chaos, and a lot of folks would get killed. So you get, when you're speeding, you get stopped by a traffic cop. You may get a formal ticket. If you're driving drunk under the influence, you may get your license revoked for a year, or you may even spend a little bit of time in jail. So that's a more serious situation. If you murder someone, first degree murder, you may spend the rest of your life in prison, or even I guess the heftiest negative sanction would be to get the death penalty, correct? So faultways and mores are very important to think about, especially for the sociologists when they're studying the phenomena of deviance in any of their studies in whatever society or culture. Then we can move on to look at just touch base to make sure that you understand. If I was in class, I would put this in a for sale. For example, when we talk about sanctions, we have positive and negative sanctions, right? We also have informal sanctions and formal sanctions. So we can break these up, and we can talk. Let's talk first of all about the one that we're not so used to thinking about, positive sanctions. So we can take positive sanctions and we can draw a grid, and we can have both informal positive and informal positive sanctions. So an informal positive sanction may be simply a pat on the back. You're doing a good job. You get a nice pat on the back. Your boss tells you to continue doing the kind of work you're doing. That would be a positive informal sanction. Encouragement, nice comments to others, positive. We say that's a positive informal sanction in the sense it's positive because it's reinforcing that behavior in a positive way. It's still a sanction. It's saying if you don't do what you should do, right? Or if you let down on what you're doing that's good already, then that would be seen as a negative. But the old saying, you get more with sugar than vinegar, or honey than vinegar. A positive sanction. I think one of the best example, which is, let's move over to the formal side. A formal positive sanction. I think one of the great examples for students would be simply the acquisition or the possibility of the acquisition of your college or university degree. So if you think about it, the college degree is there, right? It's 4 or 5 years down the road, but it's there to be had. It's kind of like the ring that you grab right when you go around on the merry-go-round. It's there, but in order to get the degree, you've got to what? You've got to conform your behavior to the expectations of the university as an institution, and you have to abide by the culture of student life, if you will, student role, student status. So if you study hard, defer gratification for 4 years, that is, put off what you want today for tomorrow. Study instead of doing what you want today. You're at home hitting the books and studying for exams. In class, you defer to the professor. You don't disrupt class or always come to class late. Sitting in boring lectures, sitting in very uncomfortable seats year in, year out, when you could be doing something else, right? All of that says at the end of 4 or 5 years is, hey, you conform your behavior, then you'll get this reward. So in that sense, it's a positive sanction on behavior. It's kind of like a positive reinforcement. Do this and you'll get this, right? It's a positive sanction. Another may be, sometimes in some jobs they'll have employer of the month. A lot of times they put their picture on the wall and Susie's this month's employee of the month. And so what is that? That's a kind of a positive sanction as well. It's saying to the other employees, if you conform your behavior to what's expected of you here on the job, then maybe your name will be up there next time. You can be where Susie's at and get this kind of recognition. Again, it's sort of a formal positive, and we're not used to thinking of deviance in a positive fashion. But negative deviance, on the other hand, we're a little bit more used to. It's a lot, all the cultural displays of negative deviance that we see in movies and TV and court day, courtroom TV shows, this kind of thing. But a negative informal would be simply like let's say your boss catches you doing something wrong at work, and they take you to the side and say, hey, don't do that any longer. I'm going to let you go this time, but just remember you can't behave this way on the job. That would be an informal negative sanction. But if you were to get fired from your job, that would be a formal negative sanction. Then you can think of, when you break the law, usually when we break the law, depending on the severity, we can get a negative formal sanction, getting, driving, speeding tickets, jail time, fines. These are all negative sanctions. If you get, you get caught plagiarizing at university, and the university expels you for a semester, for example, that would be a negative formal sanction, if you will. So just kind of think about these, read about them in the text, and then we're going to move right on over here to, I want to look at a few of the theories that's talking about the origins of deviance. The functionalist perspective pretty much takes as it does with other social phenomena, looks at deviance as playing out a positive role in society. That deviance, for example, when we look at crime from a functionalist standpoint, we have to ask ourselves, after all the war on crimes and all the money that's been spent trying to stop criminal behavior, why does it continue on as much as it does, right? And the functionalists will say it must play some kind of positive role in society. So, criminal behavior may be an outlet for the system, for people who are not able to legitimately attain the legitimate routes to making a living. Instead of them revolting in the streets, there are these informal underground types of activity that people can engage in, or criminal behavior that helps these people to survive, and in some sense it plays a positive function. It sort of lets the steam out of the system, if you will. Another important way to look at from the functional standpoint is that deviant behavior supports a whole host of middle class occupations in society. So, all the degrees in social work type training is geared towards dealing a lot of times with people that are, let's say, in mental health institutions and mentally ill, which is seen as a form of deviance, but also the criminal justice system, all the programs we have for cops and all those working in the criminal justice system is supported by the fact that the role of criminal deviance in society. So, functionally, would say it's positive in that it helps to reproduce a middle class in the United States for many occupations, simply having the existence of criminal behavior. And so they see that as a functional, positive role in our kind of society. They also are talking here about other concepts that you can study about white-collar crime, which are crimes by the middle class or upper middle class, corporate crime. Please study those concepts, if you will. But let's look at the first theory here is, and some of your readings reflect this theory, labeling theory. Labeling theory was, as a school of thought, is closely aligned with the symbolic interactionist school of sociology. And labeling theory takes position, again, these theories are trying to help us think about the origins of deviant behavior. And for labeling theorists, uh, that was in large part developed by Howard Becker, a well-known sociologist in the symbolic interactionist tradition. That labeling theory states that maintains that an act is not deviant until it is noticed by an audience, and that behavior is then labeled as such, labeled as deviant, as a violation, and then applying the appropriate sanctions and labeling the person who committed the deviance is labeled as a person that's a deviant person. They become a sort of special person that stands out, and then they get a special treatment, right? So labeling theory is important because it says that the origins of deviance is not located in the individual. The origins of deviance is located in the labels of society. Is how certain behaviors become labeled as deviant in the first place, and then once caught, a person then becomes labeled as deviant, and then maybe put through the whole process of being incarcerated, for example, taken to court, labeled as deviant. And so, for our purposes, there's a couple of concepts here that are kind of interesting to go along with the labeling perspective. And there are several types of deviance from the labeling theory perspective. The first type is simply a conformist. These are people who have not violated the rules of a group and are treated accordingly. They simply fit in, do what's expected, and they conform and are given their rewards for conforming. They don't make any waves, right? The second type is called a pure deviant, and these are people who have broken the rules of a group and are caught, they're punished, and labeled as an outsider, right? They're labeled as a deviant outsider. So that's called a pure deviant, pure form, right? They did something wrong, they got caught, and they got punished for it. Then you have what's called a secret deviance. Let's look at the definition. People who have broken the rules of a group, but whose violation goes unnoticed, or if it is noticed, prompts no one to enforce the law. Secret deviance, and certainly this is rampant throughout society. It may be a positive thing, maybe not in certain situations, but people have broken the rule of the group, a norm, and it may go unnoticed. Maybe they're not caught, so they're not defined as deviant, or if noticed, prompts no one to enforce the law for whatever reason, right? Could be because they owe the person a favor, because they're well liked within the group, and they just decide to overlook it. Sometimes this can apply to stratification. Those who are in more positions of power sometimes may be able to get away with more deviant behavior than others, simply because they're protected by those that are their closest people that work with them. Or this could happen in any situation. Somebody that's favored by somebody in power, let's say a gang, for example, and they let them off the hook, and they're not reported to whoever needs to know, and they're not labeled as deviant. So from this standpoint, then, you can break the rules from a labeling perspective, and because you're not defined as deviant, you could be considered a secret deviant. Then there's also another category called falsely accused. These are people who have not broken the rules of a group, but are treated as if they have. So from the labeling perspective, even if an individual did not actually commit an act, they can still be accused of it and still labeled. And from this standpoint, the labeling process is just as severe as it would be for a person who did commit and it did break the norm, right? And we see many examples of this in our society where people are falsely accused of doing something they didn't do. It may cost somebody their job, or more informal type of sanction, or it could be a very severe sanction. Someone's falsely accused of murder, they get labeled for it, and may get the ultimate, executed for it, and come to find out later they were innocent. You see a lot more of these kind of cases today with genetic testing, finding that those on some folks on death row are not guilty after all. They're falsely accused. So these are important to understand. But again, one of the main points about labeling theory is that we're looking at the origins of deviance is located in society's labels. And in your readings, probably one of the best examples of this would be the Saints in the Roughnecks article. And in this case, Chambliss is looking at labeling perspective across class lines. He's looking at how social class background affects this process, this relative process of labeling. And in this case, he has the Saints, which is more the upper middle class boys in the community, and then the Roughnecks are the working class kids across the tracks, so to speak. And he goes on to in his ethnographic study to show how the working class kids tend to get labeled more harshly by the community and the police, for example, whereas the Saints who engage in the same, if not worse, deviant behavior get lighter deviance labeling. They don't get labeled harshly, and just good kids out sowing seeds, and they get sent home, whereas the others get thrown in jail. And he gives you in that study. He in this study he shows you how some of the strategies and some of the issues of cultural capital. For example, the working class boys tend to lack the cultural capital that makes it easier to get by with their deviant behavior, fighting with the cops, for example. And also some economic issues, lack of money, so they're not able to buy cars and leave the community they're in, so that they can have their good time out somewhere away from the community where they're not seen and not caught. Whereas the working class kids don't have the money for a car, so their deviance is much more readily observed in the community. So that's a very interesting study from a labeling perspective. Then the next one we're going to look at is what's called structural strain theory. Structural strain theory comes out of the functionalist perspective, and the structural strain theory was developed by a very, very well-known modern structural functionalist, Robert K. Merton. And the logic of this theory, the origins of the deviance is located in the structural inequalities in society. So it looks at the structure of society, and it says that the origins of the deviance is the lack of opportunities, or that the structure of opportunities in a society at times collapses, and people are blocked out from being able to legitimately find a means to reach the goals, the cultural, material goals of our society. And so that they're much more likely to deviate and getting caught up in deviant subcultures and to commit criminal acts, for example, and get in trouble. But the blunt of the theory is that in structural strain, the main emphasis theoretically is that all of us in society, first of all, we're all socialized to want the good things in life, if you will. And so in our culture, a lot of our goals in life are material in some sense, to have a nice home, to have a nice car, clothes, nice education, nice vacation, the good life, if you will, for our, whatever that's defined by our society. And so all of us have the same cultural goals from the structural strain theorist standpoint. However, because of the opportunity structure, there are some groups that are simply blocked from being able to realize these goals in a legitimate manner. So many middle-class folks, for example, are able to go to college and get through and follow a legitimate route to the attainment of the society's cultural goals of the society. And whereas some groups don't have that route, or even if they did have the right, they don't perceive it. Or, for example, a kid born in the inner city may, and no one in his family's ever or her family's ever been to college. It may seem like a trip from Earth to Mars for them. They just don't have that cultural background or the push to even imagine going to college, for example. And but it's much more easier, a quicker route then because it seems so distant. And the more distant that it is or seems, then from this theoretical standpoint, the probability, it doesn't say 100% that a person is going to deviate, but there's a much higher probability for individuals in that situation to take the quicker route of a deviant, let's say, for example, selling drugs or prostitution, to make the means to realize the cultural goals that everyone in the whole society cherishes. Uh, from the structural strain standpoint, uh, they have a couple of categories, just like the labeling theory does. And it says that in terms of structural strain, there's the conformity, and this is the acceptance of the cultural goals and the pursuit of those goals through legitimate means. So that we have the cultural goals, they accept those, and then they also accept the legitimate means to arriving at those goals to be successful, and that's you know, for the majority of people. Then you have those that are innovators, innovation. This is the acceptance of the cultural goals, but the rejection of the legitimate means to achieve them. So again, innovation is, you know, we accept the cultural goals. We want the good life like everybody else. We want the same things in life, but we reject the legitimate means of getting there. You know, why should I go 5, 6 years of college uh, when I can just sell drugs here and make way more money and get everything now, right? There's no sense of deferred gratification. I can get it now if I simply do this, right? So that's an innovator. Then you have what we call a ritualism, and this is the rejection of the cultural goals, but a rigid adherence to the legitimate means of achieving them. So in this kind of, the ritualist is sort of like the underachiever, if you will, in society. They really reject the material goals of the society. They don't really want that much out of life, but they certainly do follow the adhere to the legitimate means of achieving the goals. Uh, so they may, do the least they have to do to legitimately get through life, but they don't, they're not high achievers. They don't really have to have a lot of material comforts, and you know, they may not be materialist in outlook at all. They may want to, for example, legitimately go through college for the sake of learning and have no real interest in material gains from that success. So usually we think of the underachiever kind of person in this role. Then you have those that were called the retreatism, and this is the rejection of both the cultural goals and the means of achieving them. So they not only they don't accept the cultural goals of the society, they also reject the means of achieving them as well. And this person is I guess, if you want to use some good examples here, would be they withdraw from society altogether and say, a lot of your, not everyone, but some of your homeless population, people on turn to drugs, alcoholism, and just withdraw from society. And then another type is rebellion, or the rebel, the full or partial rejection of both cultural goals and the means of achieving them, but then an introduction of a new set of goals and means. So here you can think of the revolutionary. They reject the society's goals, materialist goals, for example. They also reject the means of getting there. And so they may introduce a whole new set of goals and means for the society to transform that society. So that's a rebellion position. So these are different positions that strategies people can take up under the structural strain theory. But again, the main In terms of deviant behavior, the origins of the deviance is found in society structures of opportunity, or the lack of the structures of opportunity in society. And again, but if you notice in the both instances, labeling theory and the structural strain theory, that you don't have the person, the individual themselves is not to blame for the act. It's found in social definitions of deviance with the labeling theories in the structure of opportunities or lack of opportunities, structural opportunities, in for the uh, for the structural strain theories. And then lastly, we look at a theory, like we call it a cultural theory, or socialization theory, learning theory, and this is called differential association theory. And with differential association theory, again, it's very sociological. It doesn't focus on the individual as the culprit. Uh, in this instance, it's the deviant subculture, or the deviance that's found in the culture, that let's say, for example, a young person is normally, not abnormally, but normally socialized into a deviant subculture. So they're normally socialized. It's simply that they've been socialized perhaps into a deviant subculture where they've learned the skills, norms, and values and ways of behaving in that subculture. So they just simply conforming to what they've learned, and yet it's a deviant subculture. And so, you know, their deviance is not located so much in the individual that's normally socialized. They're not sick. You know, it's not a personality issue or disorder. It's the deviance is lodged in the deviant subculture itself. And so we call it a learning theory. People are simply normally socialized into a deviant way of life. Uh, and each of these theories. So let's just recap real quick. Labeling theory, the origins of the deviance is found in society's labels. In the structural strain theory, the deviance originates from the structure of opportunities and the lack of opportunities in society. And for the differential association theorist, the culprit, if you will, the deviance is located in the norms and values of the deviant subculture. In all three of these, the individual is not the object of analysis, is not the origins of the deviance, and so very sociological, all three of these. But they're, when you want to think about sociological theories and where they become practical in society, or of any value or use, many of these theories are actually used in society for example, for government programs. And in terms of these three theories, for the labeling theories, for example, a policy maybe that would suit that, or reflect that theoretical logic would be to, for example, the reduction of labels as being criminal, for example. So let's say, for example, if the society finally legitimizes smoking marijuana use, and legitimizes it from a labeling perspective, that might be a positive thing, because then that's one less label that can be applied to people. A lot of people that are in jail simply for marijuana, it would make it possible for resources to be used in some other fashion besides locking up people that are smoking marijuana. For the structural strain theorists, the policy implication would be to have better programs for the needy, for example, or people who have less access to education, to reinforce the structure of opportunities in society, so that more people can have more legitimate routes to the means of the cultural goals. For the for the differential association theorists, some policies that would come out of that theoretical perspective would be like, for example, taking the young person out of the subculture, deviant subculture, and placing them in maybe a pseudo environment, like a halfway house, for example, young offenders unit, where they're put on a token system and basically taught to try to instill a middle class type of value system. And so taking the person out of the deviant subculture and then trying to attempt to re-socialize them into, say, middle class, a legitimate routes, to take a legitimate route to success in society, very much goes along with the, this very much goes along with the differential association theory of deviance. Uh, one of my favorite chapters in the text, because it really sort of takes some of the edge off some of the other chapters that basically look at the human being in terms of their integration into society. Yes, it's all true, but because humans deviate, they're all too human after all. They're not just puppets on a string. And these theories are very the theories that are developed under looking, and many of the studies, not only in the reader, the Roughnecks, Saints and Roughnecks, but a couple of the other readings as well in that section reflect some of these conceptions. And so I think you should enjoy those, and I look forward to reading your comments on the discussion board, and I'll have an exam review up later on today for the exam for Monday and Tuesday. And I'm going to give you a little more. I'm going to give you 20 more minutes on the exam to see if we can do better on this second exam. And hopefully the review will help you. I'll put that up, and if you have any questions, please email me, and I'm more than happy to help clarify any of these concepts or theories, either through the telephone or through email. So I'll talk to you later, and we'll again, the exam will open up on. I usually open up on midnight, actually, on Sunday, and then it'll run until midnight on Tuesday. So I'll see you in the next chapter. Alrighty, after the exam. Okay, everybody. Good luck to you. Bye.